Everybody, thank you for being with us on this Saturday morning. And we welcome all of you to this initiative by Ideas Consulting Group, which we call Insights. The reason for the webinar is to make things which are complex very simple in a manner that those of you who are attending this meeting and those of you who will perhaps watch the recording of this video are able to apply what is being discussed here during the sessions at your workplace. Essentially, we have two experts who have a discussion with me. Today, unfortunately, one of the experts, Mr. Gopinath Menon, had to excuse himself due to some last minute unforeseen developments. He has communicated his regards and best wishes to all of you who have joined today. And hopefully we will get to meet him in some other edition of Insights. Today I will be having a conversation with Mr. Alok Sawal. Alok is one of my favorite professional friends, if I may say so. And today we are more than professional friends, we are actually family friends. Alok has a very interesting career contour. He is an alumnus of two of the most prestigious institutions in India, BITS Pilani and MICA. And he has worked in various capacities with different organizations. I want to highlight two roles out of his brilliant career, which I think is very contextual and relevant for the discussions that we have going to have today. I met Alok first time when he was a part of Group M in New Delhi. And Group M is, as we all know, the most powerful media buying company, media planning company in our country, globally also, part of the WPP group. In fact, when we met, there was more media planning and there was less media buying. However, things have changed since then, and media buying is taking a lot of precedence, even though I believe you cannot buy unless you plan. After Group M, Alok has had a very successful career with the brand called iNext, Dainik Jagran group. This is a brand which I think had a lot of courage to position it as sharply as anybody could in this world. What it did, what was the reason, what was the formula for success is something which is a part of our agenda today. Because I think there are a lot of marketing lessons in what Alok has achieved with this brand called iNext. Currently, he is the chief operating officer for this brand. Alok and I have a very pleasant memory of a visit to Pakistan. And there I was the program director for the Pakistan news agency, I mean, whatever industry body for their annual meet.
And Newspaper Society, PNS.
Newspaper Society. And I remember auditorium was like choco block. And Alok delivered his entire hour-long talk speaking the best Hindi and perhaps the best Urdu. And the entire audience was blown out of their minds listening to him deliver a professional talk. I don't remember, Alok, what was the topic you were talking about, but I think it was more on iNext. And I think the people were eating out of their hands. So, Alok, thank you for finding time. I know you are a very, very busy person to spare this hour with us today in the morning. Let me begin by asking you a very simple question. This journey, part of which I sort of spoke in details, has taught you many lessons. I'm sure there are many lessons which you have learned during this course of the journey, which has sort of remained with you and perhaps are relevant even today. I request you to speak about the 5 lessons that you have sort of gathered during this journey in terms of the role of media in building brands. So it's has Alok dropped out, Darshan, by any chance?
Yes, I think he has an internet issue or something.
Okay, so I think Alok is having some network issues, but he will join, don't worry. So basically, what Alok is going to speak about as once he comes back to the meeting is about his lessons that he has learned over these many years that he has been having such a wonderful journey. So Alok, I know you dropped off because of connectivity issues. I request you to speak about the lessons that you have gathered over this very interesting and successful career in terms of what are the lessons that you still apply in terms of media playing a role in building brands. Alok.
So thank you, Deepakda. Very interesting introduction, and of course, this Pakistan interaction was very, very important to recall because it also gave a dimension that how two countries which have been one country 80 years earlier, how have they grown and what are the value the media, the development of media has been there.
And the
And
love that people have for each other, it's amazing. Huh?
yes, and the way they have handled media and the way we have media, handled media. I mean, there were a lot of myths, and I think we could see those breaking at that point of time.
Thanks.
So I would, if I see it from the conventional classic part of the media, which while at MICA, we were consistently going through, and the likes of Mr. Suren Chawla and the likes of Rahul Kansal, we were interacting and we were trying to figure out things. We were far more conventional in terms of thinking and planning a role of media and brand building. So we would do this quadrant, and we will say that all the you know emotional connect with the brands can happen on television, and all the rational or the purchases of the brands which require a rational purchase will happen in print. So it was that easy, yeah, that easy. So we'll say chocolates, television, and automobile, print. We'll say finance, yeah, all the financial instruments, print, and then we'll say all the perfumes and all the other chunk of things which are little impulsive and emotional and connect and other types of things. So the brand building at that point of in time was comprehended by us that we will go very specific in terms of dividing the quadrant and then working it out. Then we always said that every medium has a role to play, and I'm sticking to the medium because that's where your question is. And we said that the campaign will break in medium A and then will graduate to medium B 15 days later, and at the end of it there will be outdoor, and we will go conventionally on the outdoor, and this will be a reminder medium. So we'll say radio, a reminder medium, outdoor, a reminder medium, television, flighting, sequencing, another chunk of anything. You mentioned it that was an era of media planning. So we'll go classic conventional way of handling the medium, and therefore relating the brand and exposing the brand on that medium. So and I mean, to a great extent, I would agree to some of the fundamentals which were at that point of in time, wherein we said that if outdoor is a medium, the strength of the medium is only a 5-second reminder. I mean, in a flash, you have to communicate and remind about the conversation. So probably the best clipping of a TV commercial in a single shot, which is the most memorable one, will go onto the outdoor with a single word, single line, or whatever, 3 words, 4 words. And on the contrary, in a print, if it is an offer, let's say if it's a refrigerator, so the details will go in over there. So the role of medium was very clearly defined, and we had, in a way, I would say, the simplicity of roles wherein we were going the classic way of handling the medium.
Correct.
And over the years, I think I would say that the rule completely, I will not say changed, but evolved, and probably boundaries diminished, and we started looking at things in a newer manner. I mean, the most conventional auto campaign about a certain brand will probably be entirely on television. And on the contrary, there will be a lot of FMCG products you can see in print these days because the requirement turns out to be, this timeline of purchase and frequency of purchase and several other factors. So
Correct.
over the years, you see this evolution, and this is a very important evolution.
Great. Alok, let me just put another layer to the question which I asked. Now, I don't know how many of you are, what age you are in, those of you who are listening to both of us. I clearly remember an era which was pre-1992, before Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh decided that this country should open up its economy. And therefore, we started getting, the life changed, basically, before 92. Then 92 to 2010 was another era where a lot of media options emerged. Then 2010 onwards, the digital penetration in our country at least started improving. People started using more data-driven mobile phones, etc., etc. And then 2020 came the biggest impact to the world, that is pandemic. Right? But if you look at the media journey, the media evolution over these three eras, and now you take 2020, 21 as the fourth era, how do you anticipate, or how do you sort of connect the entire history and connect it to the future as we go forward?
So if you allow and permit, I will go even more behind.
Okay.
And this is one favorite perspective which has been there for me. See, the evolution or existence of media in country came in for the freedom struggle. I mean, there used to be these parchas, and there were, especially in the North India, because a lot of part of the struggle which was happening in the northern part of the India. So there were these newspapers which were basically used by all the Krantikaris to just make sure that the information gets disseminated amongst them. And these were funded by some people, and they used to call it chanda. This chanda word or subscription continued even post independence also.
Right.
And the newspaper's initial subscription for about 10 years was called, what is the annual subscription or annual chanda?
Correct.
Chanda is typically otherwise used for, let's say, for any of the small communities which are collecting funds for organizing a social function,
Correct.
something of that sort. So the role over there was consistently the fight against the British Empire, and therefore the freedom struggles, and where are people gathering, and what are the new developments, and which is what the new brigadier or the brigadier general has done, and how do we tackle that, and the issues of oppression and things such as these. And I have read all of that also in the 1942-43 newspaper of Dainik Jagran. The kind of content which was there. It was very interesting content which used to be carried at that time.
Which newspaper did you read, Alok?
It was Dainik Jagran of 1942, Pratap of 1942, and Veer Arjun of 1942.
Wow.
Incidentally, we have all the copies available with us. And it is very interesting that the newspaper was playing a very different role then.
Absolutely.
Then came 47, and suddenly we were free. Right. So, interesting 47, 48 advertisements were, say, Messi sahab ki gaadi bikau hai, inka banga bikau hai, yeah.
Classified advertising in a way.
Classified advertising happening for some machines, some vehicle, some plot, certain other chunk of
transactional, that I want to sell, who wants to buy?
Yes. This was the first time when the communication was going in that direction of advertising. And the content, from a media content point of view, the 45, 50s to 70s, it was announcement of new policies by the government, and the medium itself having a role of, I would use the word gadgetier, wherein it was the source of information dissemination. We were, a media hungry country. We weren't really communicating and distributing. Akashvani or Doordarshan in any case was not there, but Akashvani was not sufficient. So the print was playing that sort of a role. 80s time period of the socialistic period of Nehru, and then moving on and turning into the then relatively freer era of public sector versus private. the film transition was that Naya Daur of Dilip Kumar, and the set of things.
Yes.
Basically the mechanization. So I have seen that within these newspapers, and especially the one I'm mentioning, the conversation was more in terms of the 5-year plans and how exactly things are happening and government policies. The 70s to 90s was an era wherein we were actually fighting and about the social change, the social dimension of the country took a change, and that was the first time amongst the newspapers there was a introduction of color. So there was only black and white advertisement.
Do you
Yeah.
know remember the exact year when color printing started in newspaper?
So so there was this Volga machines, and in 1978 it was picked up by Jagran for the first time, and it was around the same time, in those 4 to 5 years, wherein most of the color printing happened, and the supplements came into the existence.
Volga-
Prior to that, there was no context of supplements to that extent. I mean, the newspapers having this, and you look at it from other mediums point of view, Akashvani was also going through a lot of transformation because Vivid Bharati was constituted around that time, and there were small capsules and programs, the likes of Hawa Mahal and Chitra, the Binaka Geet Mala, and sponsorship of that. But I'm picking up the social context and the content-driven context, and the 70s and 80s were that era, and the reflection of content was also from a social and political, socio-political angle in newspapers, as well as the content was evolving. It was only the 82, which was the year when Asiad happened in India, and due to Asiad, the color television came in, and the Uptrons and the Westerns of the world, probably the two only Indian companies which were producing the color picture tube and therefore the color television. And then, of course, whoever could have afforded the Sony, imported from outside, the format changed. And then when we look at television, the singular Doordarshan programming converting from state to the national, and within national a 9 o'clock news and 9:30 soap opera and a Sunday feature film and Chitrahar and other chunk of anything.
And then Ramayana Mahabharata.
And the Sunday morning Ramayana Mahabharat and Spider-Man. So
Correct.
first Ramayana and then Spider-Man. Think of this combination. Or
Correct.
first Ramayana and then Star Wars. I think in the morning it was Star Wars, and 5 o'clock before the movie it was so the programming was very linear. I mean, you look at the way the entire medium programming was there. Audience, we are right now working on audience being broken into multiple segments, and then programming, or for that matter channel and precision targeting. At that point of in time, it was that the segment is actually targeting to different set of people.
Correct.
So Rasna is picking up a Spider-Man, and let's say the larger national FMCG brands are picking up Ramayana.
And even the audience didn't have enough options. There was only one. Either
Yes.
you eat or you don't see anything. So that
Yes.
also helped perhaps. And
Yes,
I
yes,
think
yes,
media planning must have been no-brainer. You put it in Ramayana, X million people will see.
yes, absolutely. And I would find it very strange, but I think it is important to mention it here, that while television and the broadcast media moved from one channel to 300 plus channels, and again we segregate it further, there will be probably 600. So I'm not considering all the only regional channels. I'm considering the mainstream, let's say, channels. In terms of print, we still do have the newspapers which are catering to the entire family. I
Yes.
mean, which is a newspaper which will say that I have done a segmentation and I am now specifically, I mean, forget the the business newspapers and the mainstream newspapers, or probably by the periodicity a Sunday newspaper. Otherwise, the fragmentation is still very little. I mean, the audiences are catered again in the same format of that Sunday programming, that in the morning Ramayana and in the afternoon, whatever Spider-Man and this thing. So therefore, on the front page and in certain inside pages, you get local news, and on page number 7 you get something for women, and on page number 12 you get sports, and page number 16. which is very, very, very strange. I mean, you look at it from this dimension, that why would a medium which has 40% of the reach in the country not change from the point of view of segregation of audiences and therefore creation in a different manner?
Absolutely.
And while we have a sizable chunk, I mean, you look at it and you consider a 40% audience reach collectively across the country on a population which is at least 70% literate population, you would find this to be a strange phenomenon. So now coming to the 90s and the 2000 and 2010, wherein a newspaper suddenly fights. I'm sorry, we have a railway line close to our office, so you would probably periodically come with this challenge.
Detective movie, that would be a cue to the detective. Okay.
So suddenly there is a newspaper which says one size fits all, and the television starts breaking it into the genres and the categories. So the news channel and Aaj Tak goes out of the one programming slot within the Doordarshan, and then NDTV goes out in one programming slot, and news is the first which jumps out, and then the entertainment and the soap operas move in the form of ZTV, and then the concerned collective general journey. And suddenly print believes that now we have to look at how do we kind of get into the modern medium of delivering and communicating. The first time print thinks that I think we got to differentiate between the urban and the rural audiences. I mean, their distinction is not turning out to be unlike television, which is thinking that I got to go the programming and genres and therefore separate channels. They're thinking urban and rural, and within urban, then bit of a positioning, repositioning, and identification happens. See, the newspapers in our country did not come for a business. They came in for fighting against freedom struggle. The reason was altogether different. It was not a scheduled plan. There was no business model. In fact, in the beginning, the cause was very different. And from that, they became a fourth pillar of the industry. And then finally, they changed to a business model wherein they were fighting with an equally strong competition on different media. And therefore, the evolution and the changes have been a little different. And therefore, the focus from 2000 to 2010 has been that how do we make sure that we are able to cater to different TGs in terms of providing different content to them, and probably even communicating and changing our deliveries into their lingo. So I'll come to that a little later if the time permits, but I think that's what has been an evolution. And incidentally, 2004, I think, Deepak Da, this MySpace and Orkut happened. Because I remember 2006, we launched iNext, and there used to be this Orkut in the country, and there was no Facebook. And and we will jokingly tell to each other Orkut wala chirkut, but but the mechanism was that the Orkut introduced the social media, and from then we moved on to Facebook, and in fact 2006 was Facebook, and then of course 2008 Twitter, and then the entire phenomena happened. We suddenly started finding link between the two. Sorry, Deepak, this is what.
Please continue.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will address this.
Yeah.
What I want, Alok, is like, for example, somebody has commented in the chat box that supplements actually help the newspaper segment audiences, which I think is what you were mentioning, women, children, career, etc., etc. What I want you to connect, Alok, is once this Orkut, Facebook things came, how the media's role in brand building continued to change till the COVID time, and then we take the next step. I request you to comment on that as well.
Okay. So when we link with this thought that, the rational means print and the emotional means television, the theory along with it was that the print content was relatively drier in terms of the juiciness of the content, and it was more news centric. And even if, so the news was mainstream, and then if you will give certain supplements, as somebody has mentioned, those were all the add-ons. Those were the layers. The newspaper will get primarily picked for the news. On the contrary, when you see a television formatting, while a 9 o'clock news was important, but you think about the entire day programming or at least 7 hours of programming, it was only a half an hour slot.
Right.
And the remaining 6 hours or 7 hours of content was a lot of different content. So therefore, relevant to the medium, the brand building and from the point of view of credibility of any brand was extremely dependent on what gets carried in the newspaper. First of all, back in the mind, the thought of, power of written words, gospel's truth, things such as these, and then an information disseminator which is providing you credible information and therefore providing you credible information in terms of what has been communicated about the brand. So the credibility of the brand and the credibility of newspaper brand also played a very important role in kind of complementing to each other.
I'll just add a funny side to this, Alok. You are in media, I have been in media, and I remember we proudly displayed this sticker called press on our cars so that we have a lot of liberties on the road that non-press people can't have. I have observed, at least many years back when I was a part of the media industry, that television channels also would put press. Because if you put TV channel, people will not respect you as much as if you put press. Am I right or wrong?
Yes,
The written word, the believability, the credibility of newspaper has always been higher than the audiovisual content. Does it still remain like that? Alok, I'm just digressing for a second to ask this question. What is your experience?
So that's a point, and you, me, and Mr. Gopinath Menon, we were having this perspective, and I will touch upon that. In his absence, also, I think we can at least take up that point. It was a very pertinent point. Yeah. So I would say that the credibility could have possibly gone away given the fact that other mediums would have used it far more effectively. Because number one, they had visuals to show, they had live visuals to show, and probably there was source credibility because in a digital medium, so I'm talking of broadcast medium, wherein they had visual to show, and in digital medium, they had this opportunity to immediately, instantly share right from the horse's mouth, because this is a handle which is being used by a certain individual, and this is the person who's quoting about a certain information. But what has been unfortunate, what has been supremely unfortunate, that when you look at the television as a medium, rather than using the opportunity of being able to show a very credible content from the point of view of actual shot, the gimmickry of television as a medium has been used in such a manner that there has been a loss of credibility. So there have been debates.
Eyeballs. So that's a very interesting situation. The gimmickry, and I'm not naming the news.
Yes, we are not naming anyone. But what we are saying is, so the agenda setting, which is an important role of a media, and media is supposed to be doing agenda setting. If the agenda setting starts happening for the convenience of a certain interested party or a certain other party or whatever it may, and when I say party, I'm not meaning to say a political party. I am saying even a corporate world, somebody like that, then suddenly the recipient of news or recipient of information gets confused. And then there is a rub-off effect onto the brands related with this also.
Does brands still have those anchors in terms of reporting what is correct, not put too much masala? Is that still on? What is the situation in print? Is it also following the television route?
So I would not say that print is carries all the sanctity, but what happens? Print becomes accountable for every single line it writes over a longish period of time. So for print, it is that do it on your own risk, and your own risk in the court of law, and do it on your own risk in the court of your reader. So if you do that over a period of time, it is a question linked to your own credibility, and which is not very collective, which is still very individual. So individual associated with brands. See, print brands have been far older than the television brands.
Correct.
News brands I'm only specifically talking about. So if they mess it up, then I think they immediately get to see the result of that. Because, you know, in television, you can switch the channel at that very moment and can move on to it. And you can come back also, possibly. But in print, if you switch the newspaper, you will probably take another year and a half to come back to it, or
Right.
probably 2.5 years, or probably never. So the risks are higher. While there is probably there may be the benefit of complacency of the reader, but there is a risk also which is higher, that for some point of in time, if a reader starts believing this is not a credible source for me, I will not go for it. So while the medium is slow, it is slow because now the digital is instant, probably 5 seconds later or a minute later. You know, television is say 15 minutes later or 20 minutes later or maybe an hour later, and print is in any case 24 hours later.
Correct.
But the fact is, and the opportunity is that in these 20 hours or in these 16 hours, there's an opportunity to check the news, verify it, get the perspective, and give some information which is an absolutely authentic information. And I think their print still scores. I mean, if you, but you know, if you don't consider certain newspapers which carry a certain view, but print still holds that ground and forte. So it becomes even more strong. My perspective is it will become even more strong in the digital era and in the broadcast era, then possibly becoming less credible compared to what it was in the past.
One very interesting comment has come from Tumpa that if you look at daily lifestyle habits, print is like staples, which is true. Srinivas, I have seen your hand being raised. We will open up for question answers after the end of the discussion. Please hold on to your questions. Others, you want also type in your questions at the chat box and we'll take all the questions. Alok, now let me come to this pandemic. You know, I can tell for myself, I had few newspapers which I used to subscribe to. In the first phase of the pandemic, we stopped subscribing to the newspaper with the fear that it will bring the virus home, right? And I'm sure I'm not an exception. That's what has happened everywhere.
Absolutely.
Right? So, given this consumer perception and consumer or a reader's perception, who also could be a decision maker for a brand, do you notice that the equation in terms of weights given to different media is changing, and how is it evolving in the pandemic? And after that, I will ask question specific to iNext, because that's one big lesson for everybody. There are a number of questions coming in, Alok, and let me just give you an early alert that I will be asking you questions on how do brands with limited budgets, I mean, any budget is limited, but with small budgets, look at media for brand building. I'll be asking you this question as we go forward. But let me first ask this dynamics which changed.
Yeah.
How are things happening because of that?
So, Deepakta, you are right that the moment, you know, all these sudden challenges make us do things very differently. So, digital as a medium, I would use the word not benefited the most, but I think has been exposed to its real strength in this time period.
I like it.
And it has been for broadcast media, it has been that it has moved from, you know, the programming on television to live streaming and therefore OTT platforms. For print, it has been you get the news in the form of either a PDF, your newspaper, if you are still sticking to that, or else you go through the search route either on Google or for that matter on Twitter. And if you want a specific information, if you want only the top stories, you can pick up again any of the social media and you can pick up your medium. Say I am an NDTV and I wish to search only the news through NDTV, I can still go and follow it and I can get that information. So that change has come in. But there are certain other very interesting observations we had. I think even the print realized in this last 1.5 years that it had not utilized its own strength to the fullest extent. And what it was doing in the last 15 years was just one very little step and sham in terms of, I have a website, but I do provide the news, but I, convert my print news and I give in story. The print itself had the strength. The interesting insight is, Deepak, that for a daily of the size of Dainik Jagran, there will be 8,000 reporters which will be required to cover about 8 states,
Okay.
because it has to come in from a tehsil, it has to come in from a district headquarter, the bureau chief, and then, so if you are catering to 400 districts and each of the districts have at least 4 to 5 tehsil, you are directly having 2,000 correspondents. And how have you utilized it? You are creating 2,000 stories. Have you effectively utilized it on the digital medium? Just one dimension I'm sharing it with you: the instantaneity, the hyper local connect, the information. Print is woken up to the fact that it can provide credible information, like how on the on not just broadcast medium, and there are examples to that, also on the digital medium, using the strength of social media and creating their own channels. And this information is going to be probably far more credible than an unidentified, unauthenticated source of an information. So that's one. And therefore what happens, it is the amalgamation and the best of the both world. If your reader has been there with you for the credibility of the brand, and reader wishes to be on the digital for the quickness and ease of use, whichever way, because print only comes in the morning, but all throughout the day you have a digital opportunity. This bridge has been very effectively worked out by a lot of print brands. So while there will be 3 or 4, so I would use, and for the sake of ease only I'm naming them, there will be Scoop Whoop, there will be certain other such brands which are the new age. They never had a print in the, in the past. They're also coming up. The print has an opportunity, especially I would use the word, the regional print has an opportunity to hold on to their audiences, and at the same point of in time provide them the ease on the digital medium. So the strength of the brand and the ease of the medium can be worked out. I look at it like this.
For print, Alok, two things have worked during this pandemic.
Yeah.
I would say one
Yeah.
is that I am consuming INEX stock Jagran, whether I hold it in the hand like this or I hold it in the hand like this.
Yeah.
That's point one.
Yeah.
And with it, subconsciously, I am getting all the credibility that I associate with that particular brand of print. Right?
Yeah.
Third, the advantage is that I am getting news virtually on a real-time basis, unlike only morning in the print. And fourth, I think this is the most important consideration, is that safety.
Yeah.
Safety is in multiple ways. One is that physical touch of the newspaper, and therefore you are protected against virus.
Yeah.
Safety means you can rely on the news. And third is, if you like a news, you can also share it with people who you think will be.
Yes, you can like it, you can forward it, and you can share it in multiple.
Look, if your brand or any print brand is getting multiple exposures, if you can get the right content on the digital platforms, is that what is happening?
Yes, yes, I think you said it. This is most important. I would agree with each of these, except for the point on which Deepak very effectively, I would say the entire print industry, especially the language press, has been able to break this myth of the virus going through the newspaper, because we have the daily in Mumbai, and we have the daily as a media house in smaller towns. So our Mumbai daily will probably lose 80% copies during the pandemic, but our daily which were there in the smaller towns probably lost just 20% copies. And I'm talking about last year, April, May and June, the first 3 months, the lockdown months.
Correct.
So the audience behaved little differently. First of all, at one place there were governments who were saying that no, I think it is not safe for vendors to distribute the newspaper.
Correct.
And while there were governments who were supporting it, at one place there was a collective, I will use collective mass decision or collective hysteria of not using the newspaper. At other locations, people said, oh, I will just keep the newspaper for 15 minutes in the balcony in the sun, And there were, from ICMR and from several other, scientific bodies wherein the communication was coming in. It's okay to use the newspaper and it is safe. So therefore, we did not come across this challenge, and this is the one which I want to highlight. Very important one, but I want to highlight because when I speak to the friends in Delhi and Mumbai, and they, with by default, they assume and they say, "Oh, but your newspapers, stopped circulating." But
I
this,
include in that
that,
list because I, as you rightly said, read the newspaper in the balcony.
yeah.
Still, the
Yeah.
rest of the family doesn't read newspaper any longer. Who used to read the newspaper when it was
Yeah.
difficult to do that?
Yeah.
That's fact.
Yeah. So therefore, what has happened, because this part of the press did not see that level of drop. In fact, let me now talk about the business dimension related with it. The loss turned out to be that while advertiser believed that the copies have come down, so therefore they brought down the rates and they stopped advertising, or they were little retarded in terms of their advertising, the copies were as many, so the newspaper was, had to bear the loss, which is what we call print loss or sales loss. We were to bear the print loss because the copies were not coming down, but
Correct.
the advertising was coming down. So for some of the publications in the, I would use in the last financial year, not in this financial year, this was an overbearing burden situation wherein they were doing as many copies, but they were not getting the advertisers at that point of time. However, I think now largely the corporate media and industries and their counterparts in the smaller towns and the regional offices and the dealers and other set of people, they have given back the feedback to them that I think we are using it and therefore everything is all right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, I think it's so engaging talking to you. I mean, I am losing sense of time, but we can't do it for the interest of the audience.
Yes.
Quickly, the journey of iNext. How did you build iNext as a brand? Because I know there are several lessons in brand management for the audience who is listening to us. That's one. And now what I also want you to request to you is give us one or two case studies how print, including iNext, has been used, not print, media, has been used by one or two smaller brands, not the levers of the world with good, and to build their brand. So one part is the iNext story as it has emerged, and one or two case studies which is relevant for small advertisers in terms of media planning, buying strategy, given the current context. I will request if you can focus on education as an industry, because which could be vocational training, it could be professional courses, it could be even coaching classes for NEET, JEE and all, because I know there are people in the audience who belong to that industry and they would highly benefit from that. So look, iNext story and then how the brands can benefit from media now.
So Deepak, the Jagran already had a very strong presence in northern market. The reason why iNext came in existence was clearly identifying that there is a segment which is looking forward to content which is far more evolved and far more TG specific, which is not the case. And I was telling you about that most of the dailies have come in from an era wherein they are catering to everyone. So this learning based on the consistent researches which were happening through the group made us realize that there should be a daily which should be catering only to the urban audiences, slightly younger audiences. And this much was very clear in our mind. What would happen was to be decided after that. So when iNext was initiated, the brief was, if there is this TG, do what they like, and we were like a Vodafone dog. Be where your reader is. And be where your reader is, the first one turned out to be what language? He said, be what your reader is. My reader is a reader who speaks Hindi, English mix, speaks local words. He is in Lucknow, he speaks Urdu. He is in Varanasi, will speak the local lingo, wherever he is. So we said our language is what my reader's language is. Very difficult in the beginning because the journalists were used to write the copy in a certain manner. They will think of a rough copy the way they would think of, but they will convert it into the clished Hindi and the regular conventional one. You know, the Doordarshan Salma Sultan style news reading.
Correct.
They'll convert it into one. Very composed and calm and speaking. And the change. So we learned this lesson from television, that when the Doordarshan can change to Aaj Tak and Aaj Tak to a conversation, and most of the time now the news readers and the anchors do conversation, why would we not do conversation? So we said our language and the style of communication, very conversation communication. So we identified that. So there were certain things which we identified. Then we identified what subjects. We said the subjects, and very difficult, because newspapers, have to be like democracy. Sabke liye, everything, you ought to be doing this. How can you do? So we said internally in the content creation, we are non-democratic. We are creating it for a certain TG. We will identify what are the interests of in that manner and highlighting that part. So we picked that up.
I just pause you here, Alok, and I just want to say one sentence for the benefit of all of us who are here. And I say this over and over again in brand strategy: no brand can be meant for everybody. We have to decide who is the key target audience or primary target audience of my brand, and my brand has to cater to the needs of that primary target audience. Funnily, in print, if you look at magazines meant for women, Femina, for example, readership data suggests that it has got 52% readership,
Male reader.
48% women, right? In male readership happens because the content is catered to the women. Women are more curious about what women are learning from these magazines, But the fact remains, Femina is not creating content, or any such women's magazine like Riya Shobha is not creating content for the man, even though man is consuming it. And I think that's a very important lesson in branding, that we must learn that branding is going to have its boundaries. And there will be people who lie outside the boundaries. They can come within the boundaries and consume the brand. But the brand's entire objective is to cater to the people who are within that ring fence. Look, sorry, I interrupted, but I thought
you said it rightly. And in fact, this is how we define. We said our positioning and our advertising imagery is going to be those who are youthful. And to that extent, the protagonist is going to be a young face. Whenever INX protagonist was used in the initial 10 years of branding. However, we are aware that the people who will be reading our newspaper will be youthful, those who are young at heart, and these might be even in the age group of 35 to 55, or possibly even 55 to 65. Practically, those set of people who are looking forward to change in life, they're open to new ideas, they want freshness in terms of their thinking, and they're consistently seeking information from that dimension. So therefore, the tonality of our communication, I talked about the language, the tonality of communication turned out to be the same. And we prepared this entire team in from that point of view. The second aspect, Deepak Da, we said, which was very important, which was that we are incidentally also connecting with our readers through the newspaper, through print. So which means the logic was we are connecting with our newspaper readers, with our audience, and also through the newspaper. So when this was clear to us, we said that it is as important for us to connect with them outside the newspaper as it is through the newspaper. Because from the point of view of my bond with them, which means the newspapers bond with them, and from the point of view of what the advertisers are looking forward to, it was this strong bond. So we said that there will be all those celebrations in their life which are important, which we will do with them. They are going to the college for the first time. We will celebrate their fresher welcome. They believe into fun, freedom, fitness. We'll go with them on a cycle ride and we will travel with them and we will engage this as a community activity. They are wondering, the parents are wondering, because they are growing up the young kids. It was a big issue. We said the beat itself is parenting. So there was no beat like parenting in any of the conventional newspapers, but in INX we had a beat which was called parenting. And the parenting as a beat required us only to focus onto the young parents or the parents of young kids and their challenges. There's school buses, this, that, course, booklets, other chunk of thing, health, nutrition. So we said we'll celebrate Parenting Day. And we'll celebrate that Parenting Day. This is World Parenting Day. And it turned out to be a huge success because people were looking forward to expert advice that my kid has got some challenges from consistently over attention seeking, behavioral, or for that matter excessive use of mobile or phone or digital, and safety and several other set of things. We recently won an award because we did speak to the parents and we did speak to the young ones about good touch and bad touch, and basically the set of thing. It was a bold topic. We did speak to them at several forums. We went to the schools. We made sure that this communication was very, very important, and parents appreciated it. Everybody in the schools and college ecosystem appreciated it. So when we looked at that education, so now I'm coming to that perspective which is related with the education. When we looked at education, we realized that we are catering to an audience and we are connecting with them, either whether they were young parents or they were students or they were parents who had the awards till the 12th standard. So in the 12th standard, if the kid is for 18 years, the parent is going to be say 30 to 40 years, 45 years, something like that. So we said, if we are speaking to them, the bigger challenge which we are seeing is that what should they be studying? What will they be making their career in? The biggest topic for them turns out to be, for either the parents or for the kids, that what should I be doing in my life? And unfortunately, in our country, the challenge turned out to be that we weren't really going with the choices of individuals. We were going with the herd mentality of engineering अच्छा है, medical अच्छा है, this is good, MBA कर लो, थोड़ा सा कम है, art sides करो. You meet a young kid, I'm talking about 15 years earlier, the phenomena has completely changed now, and say, what is he doing? Oh, he's doing arts. Oh, okay. We'll suddenly, okay, as if consoling him that you are fine, you're doing art subjects and commerce or something like that. So we said that we will have to touch upon this as a perspective. And fortunately for us, like I mentioned, if our objective and our TG was clear, and the clients who associated with us, they were also looking forward to similar solutions. I went to one of the large coaching companies, in this country, the largest, rather, I would say, at one point of time, the only one which has been. And they said, our problem is we do not want the students who are not clear that they want an engineering as a career, because we keep coaching them, and they are not the one who turned out to be. So can you filter out those set of students for us who are really interested in engineering? So we created something which is called Indian Intelligence Test, which was checking the multiple intelligence and the aptitude of the students. And what we created or co-created was, at one side, liked by the teachers and the principals and the students and their parents, and on the other side, by an advertiser or a client or somebody else. And we were just the facilitator for both of them. And of course, that was a business model, but it was a business model which was for both of us. Similarly, there was a cycle manufacturing company, and their problem was that these black cycles operate on a 5% CAGR, because these have, after a while, there was a saturation. So they said that we are opening up new stores, and I think these stores were called Track and Trail. And we are looking forward to people being excited about these 15,000, 12,000, 20,000 rupees worth of cycles, which are more for fun, freedom, and fitness. So we said, great, wonderful. Let us go to our audiences and talk to them that why don't we celebrate cycling? So we started celebrated cycling some 13 years earlier. iNext is now 16-year-old. And we said that we'll celebrate it together. So we told administration, I said, yes, we'll celebrate it together. We'll also become part of it. So the cycle manufacturing company, we, administration, people, everybody celebrated it. So we've created a property which is called Bikeathon, which is no longer an iNext property. It is people's property. They come to us and they say, when is Bikeathon happening this year? Can you create a club? And we just gather everybody together, and that the business model runs like that. So our perspective turned out to be, if you know who your TG is, if your client is also following the similar TG, then co-create something which is value creating for both them and for you. And you don't have to do something out of the way. So this is where I think when I move on to certain cases, this is how our journey has been.
This you did many, many years back, if I'm not mistaken, 13 years as you said. So when cycling was not also so much in fashion. I mean, today we are forced to look at cycling because as an alternate route of this. Tell me one thing, Alok. What lessons I draw from this little talk that you spoke about INEX is that the media cannot be looked at just the form. It has to be looked at as a media in terms of connecting with people who the media can access for them. Right? I think that's a big lesson.
You rightly stated it.
And
It is the aggregation of people who media is connecting, not the format.
not the format. And therefore, brand custodians therefore must look at media more as a brand partner rather than a media house providing some
Space or
and space
time.
or time. Do you see this evolving even further as we go forward, given all the changes that's happening around, and with digital being a part of the entire landscape?
Oh yes, very much, very much. Now I come to some of the situations and cases, and I'm talking about both large corporates understanding this very clearly. So we connect to youngsters and a large corporate which globally creates shaving instruments wanted the similar situation wherein our association with them becomes their association with that same set of teaching. And what could have we created, co-created? So, this shaving instrument company had the opportunity of highlighting that eventually it is the confidence in you and it is about your career. It's not just shaving. It is the way you groom yourselves and the way you become, and therefore you drive your career. So the culmination of it was that are you recruitment worthy? So that is where the direction was, and they associated with us, and they created opportunity wherein there were people who were grooming the students. They were telling to them, talking to them. They were telling that what is it which is required to be, to become presentable. What is the role of being presentable? How should you be speaking? Not just a physical appearance, but also communication, and information dissemination, handling the situation. So this turned out to be a common objective, and that when they did, as the time evolved, they said that this entire process we'll take digitally. So we can run this entire set of an interaction on webinars. So we are running those formats now on webinars. Earlier we were doing it physically inside a campus, but now we are running it on a webinar. There is this university which has one of the most amazing courses. This is the #1 private university, technical university in the country, and they have some of the most amazing courses. They have the courses which are not just computer science, but along with it MIML, artificial intelligence, robotics, mechatronics, things such as these. And all these things they want to talk about. They want to talk about what should be the future and how should that happen. Now, we are a credible source because we connect with the audiences on an extremely credible communication platform. We are how our behavior with our, partners, or let's say the customers have been, which in our case are readers. So these guys have used that credibility of the larger media house, which is Jagran, within that INEXT, which has been associated in such forums, and they talking to these set of people only about the subjects. So the subjects are being talked about, and incidentally, somebody wishes to know where the mechatronics is being taught and where AIML, MIML is being taught, and where artificial intelligence and robotics is being taught along with computer science. They can explore, they can figure it out, they can get to know about it. So the mechanism is that within education also, the advertising is no longer just carry something in the newspaper as an advertisement and say that we are open for admissions and things such as these. It is basically talk to your audience, communicate with us, and in the process, if you talk to 50,000 people, probably there will be 5,000 who are interested in you. Probably about 1,000 of those will take admission in your campus, and that is what your business model is, wherein you got to reach more directly. I mean, directly rather than on the ad being carried and therefore leaving the decision onto the individual or recipient to whether read the ad or not read the ad. So moving away from reading the news ad to experiencing the brand is what our way of looking at things has been.
Alok, I think in this entire piece, the brand iNext is actually bringing in credibility as the main component. Because if I want to do it without an iNext, people will not trust me as much as if I do it on a iNext platform. Am I right in that? So
Yes, yes,
therefore, the core strength of print
yes.
is actually getting sort of leveraged through print as well as other forms of connecting, which where digital is playing a very, very important role.
Absolutely. The credibility of the brand plays a very important role, and we are conscious not to dilute that. And once we have done this transaction, let us say with 500 students online, instead of carrying the ad, if next day we carry the transcript of that communication, which is informative to 50,000 people who may not have been able to attend it, that's a better way of communicating about a university brand than content itself turns out to be the branded content. And this is what helps along with the credibility of the newspaper also. Yes.
Absolutely. Alok, little bit of example, one or two case studies from your group MBAs. Any brand which comes to the top of my mind where, as a media partner, media planner, you believe that media played a very important role in the building of that brand. Any case studies on those lines?
So I recall a brand which was a cult brand those days, which still is a cult brand, but I would say it had a very different cultish approach at that point in time. Those were the days when, incidentally, now Jagran Group acquires that brand, has acquired that brand. But
Okay.
it was Midday, and Midday in Mumbai was a very different brand. It was nowhere close to the lead player in Mumbai, Times of India, but it had its own position, and Midday had this capability of being part of every Mumbaiker's life in a slightly different manner. And if I have to plan my day, if I have to know what is going to happen and what should I be doing, I will pick up a Midday. This
Right.
is how it was. So Midday actually, living to its positioning and legacy, said that what if you want to go and meet several corporates or the people who are in the corporate world through us, and we'll do celebrations with them. So that is one example which we did. We worked out for one of our brands. It was a liquor brand, and we did something in the corporate offices as post office celebration. Whoever were liberal and open to it, along with the World Cup, along with the football games, along with certain other chunk of thing. And I think this could have only been done by Midday because the brand stood with those values and those positioning perspectives. We did something with very, very serious with one of the Maharashtra brands in the smaller towns, wherein they were doing something as part of their responsibility with the with the farmers, and what they were doing, we became part of that. I would say examples are few because not many brands were doing things such as this. This very interesting example of a South Kerala based brand, a Malayalam Daily, which will do celebration of elephants. So people will own elephant, and on a certain day they will carry one entire page like pictures of those elephants along with the proud owner, and there was a classified communication in that. So you know it was such an interesting thing. We never really thought that elephants will be celebrated like that. So we did sponsor that entire page and for one of our brands, and we did something. So I think there were a lot of very interesting things. But I would say that a brand, a media brand, thinking like I am for my audience, and therefore my relationship in all dimensions with my audience is going to be according to that, is very, very important. And when advertiser can use this strength of a media brand, I think it benefits the most rather than just using the space in the newspaper.
Correct. So, Alok, I am getting a feeling when talking to a lot of people across in terms of various product categories, whether it's education, healthcare, TMP bars, which is a very big category of advertiser now, or any such category. Somehow there is this herd feeling that it's all about digital. Is it all about digital, or it is digital also along with other medium in combination which will work given the current context? What are your thoughts on that?
So one is that the digital plays a very, very, very important role. Let us not forget it. But how do you use digital? How do you plan a campaign on digital? How do you amplify that campaign? How do you add credibility to it? How do you visibly make it impactful and strong? Is something which I would say the brand custodians need to think about. So, for example, digital will help immensely in influencer marketing
Right?
on the social media. But that influencer needs to be highlighted in certain other medium as well. If you keep it isolated, say I'm a Instagram celebrity and I am a relevant individual for promoting a certain brand, and that communication is going, but how do you amplify that? So there is this fundamental perspective which was relevant 30 years earlier also, now also, and will remain 20 years. The power of multimedia or compounding is far far more important than using linear single medium approach. So the marketer will have to very intelligently think that how is my campaign going on social media but is immediately amplifying on other medium. And if that is not there, in isolation, a social medium, or for that matter, a digital medium, whichever one is getting picked up, will not be able to do or justify the role. And that's where I think we have to think intelligently. Even when we do certain things these days, we are keeping into the mind that we are carrying it on social media, our own social media. We are carrying it in print. We are utilizing it on radio because as a group, we have certain radio opportunities. Even if they were not, it was not there, we would have used any of the other radio companies. So the amplification, communication, and multiplicity is very important. Isolation, you think you will be able to run it on any one medium, it is not possible.
Alok, when you are speaking, one interesting thought crosses my mind. Let us look at Amazon as a platform. Digital. Everybody knows what is Amazon. Everybody actually interacts with Amazon very regularly. But when the super sale offers come, Amazon has to rely on print and television advertising to drive traffic to its platform. It has got so many sort of registered users. Why do we need print or television or outdoor or radio to support it? I think that is what actually, in a way, sums up what you are saying. That media multiplier is what we have learned in our earlier days. That actually continues with digital occupying an important space which was not there earlier.
True. Had that not been the case, all the OTT platforms, Amazon, Flipkart, any of these, more than that, Deepak, of course, this is very important. First of all, getting consumers on board. But besides that, what is happening for the brands such as these? There are perception issues they have to handle. On one hand, they are probably fighting this perception war of, am I the giant killer of the small corner stores and retail stores and other chunk of anything?
Really?
So Amazon is providing opportunity to these retailers to be on board and therefore able to use their inventory and showcase it and sell it to more set of people. Now, how do they handle it? That communication and that information may also be an information which they have to they have to share with a credible medium. Again, I'm using the word credible medium. So there could be possibly branded content, there may be PR stories, there may be success stories, there may be an opportunity of empathy which these large corporate brands carry. Those will come into the print. So when a brand builder and when a brand manager, when a sales manager thinks, you are right, he'll immediately think, how many pieces will I be able to sell? But when a brand manager thinks, it will be able to see, how is my brand seen as? What is my relationship? Why would a consumer keep coming again and again to Amazon? And why would it consistently endorse this to others? Then I think this relationship creation has to go multifaceted. It is not that I have just promoted certain products and it has got sold. Yes, you use that, you use this as well. And sometimes not just think print from selling it in the 3 days, the highest number of things, which will happen in any case. Otherwise, the print would not have got utilized. But also for building the brand to very different level.
Alok, you started your recap of the history of media by talking of classified ads. That I have a car I want to sell, I have this I want to sell. I want to answer, I want to know from you, because I am out of the industry for many years now. Does print classifieds, I'm specific, I'm not talking online classifieds, still work for brands like education, where the budgets are small, the reach needs to be more? Does it still work?
I will not give I will not say a outright yes for that. The reason turns out to be that education is also about credibility, and education is about assurance. Eventually, education says that you will be able to make a great career.
Right.
Education is not about an opportunity of a job to be filled. Had that been the case, that there is a vacancy and do you want to apply, one can understand a classified would have played a role. But when you are talking about a brand to be built, because that is the only and the most important reason for somebody to be taking admission inside a certain institution, then in isolation a classified will not work. My perspective is that it would be better to explore it from the point of view of branded content, a direct communication, connecting with the audiences on a webinar or a digital platform, depending on whatever is possible. Now, this could also be a webinar which is conducted inside the schools, wherein, or for that matter, if it is professional education, inside the auditoriums, not necessarily people are present there. So that opportunity has now come in, that a speaker doesn't have to come physically, can come onto the screen, and then the transcript of that communication and information getting disseminated on multiple forums. This might be a digital information in the form of small capsules. This might be information in the print. This might be information dissemination at other sources. Because if you think of isolation and classified, like I mentioned, it is very utilitarian in its perspective. And while getting admission in an institution is not that utilitarian, it also has a perceptual credibility and several other set of things.
Last question, Alok, before we take questions, if there are any in the chat box. I find a lot of these MBA students today really struggling to get a good job. And they have normally the campus placements takes them to insurance companies and sales and all, which most of them don't want to do. However, media as an industry is not getting considered as an employment opportunity. And I'm saying media. So for the benefit of the audience, especially those who have children who are in that age group where they are deciding on their careers, what all does a child need in him or her to make a successful career in media? A few thoughts on that.
I think for most of the media roles, because media would have either the content role, which is a production role, or possibly a selling role or marketing role, either brand marketing or advertising, sales marketing, or product marketing. See, media is all about communication. I would say that if an individual has strong interpersonal skills and communication skills and is fairly extrovert, I would say that media turns out to be a good opportunity. So these three criteria, these three qualities, good communication skills and interpersonal skills, which is important. One would say that this is important for any role, but I think in media industry, because this is the business of communication.
Correct.
So therefore, irrespective of the department, except for if you are in accounts, for every other department, I think communication plays a very important role. The second thing is if an individual or a kid or a youngster is carrying that empathy of social and societal perspectives, beliefs into being into part of the society and doing something for the society. Whether one turns into a journalist.
Oh, I think Alok has again had a break in his.
I think I've got disconnected again
Oh,
for
now
a
you're
shorter
back.
while.
You're back.
Oh, I'm back. Okay. So this part is the second important part, that a social or socially strong outlook. Then, of course, there are individual functional skills which are important.
Okay. Let me go to the questions before I request Srinivas to switch on your microphone and speak. There is a question from Shlok Jaiswal, a very specific question. What should an education brand change in communication when moving into East India from North India?
What should an education brand change into communication if it is moving from East India to North India?
From North India to East India.
North India to East India. Okay, which means it is attracting the TG in East India while it is a North India based brand.
Correct. But let's say the North India brand has opened a franchisee in East India where the person wants to enroll.
Sure.
So what type of changes would be required in the communication?
First of all, there are certain things which should not be changed, which is more important, and I'll talk of that. And which is where I think most important is people should know what do you stand for. And that stand for should very clearly be visible in all dimensions of your communication. So if you have representatives and these are meeting to the people, and I'm talking in context of the entire brand management, these should be holding those values. So, if that is what it is, if your communication wants to attract a new set of people, every creative should carry that value and it should be very clearly visible. So this is something which I would say should not change, because that is what you stand for and this is what it should remain. The other aspect going to Eastern India, or for that matter, Southern India, any other region, is the cultural sensitivity. The cultural sensitivity of communication. And I have come across several creatives which are created in different regions which are not culturally sensitive. There are examples. And, I will give you an example, probably, while it is in the advertising realm, which is where I will call it relevant, and pardon if it has any other dimension to it. There is Dr. Days in Kolkata. You are aware of it. And Kyo Karpin is their famous brand.
Right.
And the word जी हाँ मेरे बाल मजबूत है या तमाम सारी चीजें हैं, in two different languages have two different connotations. You have to be careful about it. So therefore, something as small as this, we used to read about, Nova. There was this Ford Nova or some other brand Nova, and Nova in a certain language meant it does not work. And they had launched their product in that particular market. We know, in all the semantics of advertising, the communication plays an important role. So I think we got to be sensitive. I've talked about very cliched and stereotypical examples, but I would say that when you look at the layer, you will find that it would have a very, very important perspective. So the language, the contextuality. The contextuality will change from the point of view of that what are you ultimately trying to do. Because if you are an expert in getting good placements, and if that is what your core strength turns out to be, I think that must come right at the beginning, and that should be very, very clearly, communicated. If you believe into the campus safety of the students, and you believe that could be the very important reason for girls, or let's say those parents who are very concerned about students to be joining the campus, do make sure either in a video or in an audio communication or somewhere you are communicating about it. So like I have said, every medium has a different role to play. Do not think that print will do everything for you or TV will do everything for you, but somewhere you make that opportunity of communication wherein that comes in.
Excellent. Thank you, Alok. I think you have answered it absolutely very clearly for the benefit of Shlok. Srinivasan, you had raised your hand. Would you like to ask any question or comment? Because we have already overshot our time limit by 20 minutes, and this always happens when I'm in conversation with Alok, because I lose sense of time.
Very sorry. I take all the blame.
No, you don't take any blame, because you couldn't have done outspoken if I had not been with you. Srinivasan, if there is, I am muted by host. Darshan, can
Okay.
you open
Yeah.
up?
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Just thanks for a very interesting discussion. I tuned in because, of course, I knew Deepak Da back in the day, and Gopinath was scheduled to speak. Is another
Yeah, I
very
know
good
he
friend
did
of mine.
just last minute. Yeah.
So I know, and just for the others, a little bit of background about me. I spent about 10 years in marketing, of which about 8 were in media marketing. I was so I know that side of the story. I was even advertising manager of Times of India back in the day. Then I became a journalist, and I retired a few months ago as editor of the Hindu Business Line newspaper. So 30 years for 35 years in media, of which about 8 9 in the sales side and the balance in editorial. And very fascinating for me, because as an editor, so 5 years when I was editor of Hindu Business Line, my struggle was to manage the transition from a print only to a print uh, plus digital to pure digital future in a sustainable manner, in which means that we were making money. We're just not there on digital, but we're making enough money to sustain ourselves, and that's been the challenge. So one of the challenges I face, and that's something which you talked about a lot, and I disagree there, was I find it was very difficult to transfer credibility from print to digital. Why? That's because how people come into digital, or how they consume digital news, I'm talking about here, media, is very different. 80%, you know that, 75 to 80% of traffic in all news website is through Google search, which means somebody is looking for something, they land on a story, they read it, and the bounce rate is also very high, 85%. So which means that only 15% go on to read something else in that website, spend some time. Rest all go after that one story, or even headline and a few lines. If you actually monitor how much they read of a story, there are softwares which let you do that on a live basis. So what happens is that the reader has no idea really about this whole atmosphere surrounding, the masthead credibility and so on. They're just seeing what they see on a digital screen. Something from Postcard News or Op India is no different from something from the Hindu. Okay, in that sense, or it is consumed even in a secondary fashion. Somebody copy paste something, it goes as a WhatsApp forward. There is no source, there is no head, there is no tail, and credibility is not an issue which people seem to be even worried about. Second is, and this is I think a real problem with the media, is not acknowledging enough publicly. Okay, the second is that for whatever reason, the ruling dispensation in the country has chosen to discredit media in particular. Right, there is a consistent messaging, consistent attack on media, and I'm not just talking about media they don't like, the Hindu group. Okay, ठीक है, Enram को पसंद नहीं है, he does uncomfortable stories on Rafale, so attack Hindu at every opportunity. That doesn't matter. They attack all media, right? Except for what they call Godi media, which is the real Godi media, which is the ones which are on the approved list, which will occasionally once in 6 years get an interview with the Prime Minister. ठीक है? So this is, I think, a very dangerous trend, because they have a very powerful communications team, and they have a very powerful demagogic communicator who leads this, and that stamp of credibility they give to this, I think, absolutely can be the death of independent media, and with the media is not having the courage to stand up enough and fight this. I'm not talking about individual attacks on somebody, that's their thing, but the broader sweeping of dismissing all media as Godi media or prostitutes or Lutyens gang or this thing. Sabko matlab tar everybody with, and that that what happens is that devalues news. You devalue news, you devalue the masthead, right? You devalue the masthead, you devalue the environment that you're providing advertisers and brands. So it is in everybody's interest to do so, right? I think you talked again and again during the course of your discussion about this, how credibility adds value to the brand's messaging, and that's why a purely digital player like an Amazon advertises in print, because they need that print cachet of credibility to occasionally reinforce their messaging to their customers, right? So, but if that credibility is being destroyed in an organized fashion, I think it bodes ill for the future of independent media. And without independence, you will not have credibility. That is the given,
Yes.
right? If you are not independent, you will not have credibility. You may have followers, but our followers will be fair weather friends. Okay, so you might be number one in the TRP ratings. We'll not go into the police cases on TRPs at this point in time, but the fact is that it doesn't still translate into this thing. So, and advertisers know this instinctively. They don't quite buy the numbers, or they don't pay the same number premium for such a media as they would for a credible media in their minds. And I think all of us know that, even though like in print has considerably lost pricing power over the last few years, when it comes to advertising in particular, it is still it manages to get a credibility premium by and large. Though established ones, I'm talking about people like your group, or Jagran, or this thing, the ones which have had a stake in building up a reputation for credibility, and they've tried to maintain it over the years, and so they still get a credibility premium. So when it is this important, I'm really saddened by the fact that the industry is not doing so. Whether it is the INS, which is the Malik's organization, or whether it is the Editors Guild, of which I am a member, by the way, and which represents the sort of journalists and editors on this thing, or the many journalist unions and press clubs in the country, कोई कुछ नहीं बोल रहा है. This conspiracy of this thing, which is actually, I think, destroying media from within. So this is one of the challenges. So digital, print, all these things come later. So credibility is the key, and if you can, I think the sort of code to crack, particularly for legacy newsrooms in transitioning to a digital future, is transferring the print credibility and the print premium to a digital environment. So these were the two short points I wanted to make. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Srini. I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I'm sure Alok has one or two things to say about it. I personally think, just as a comment I'm mentioning, it's not a discussion that we're looking at. I think thereby technology, apps and downloads of apps, etc., will provide some amount of semblance of remaining within the brand while looking for news and content. That is one of the solutions, but I fully agree with you, Srini, that unless the independence of media remains, the credibility will slowly get decayed. That's, given without saying. But I think, I believe it things course correct as they go forward. Automatically, some forces work together for that. Final comments from you, Alok. Then we have to close because it's already 12:30. On the comment which Srini made, and then we'll have a group photograph with all of us switching on our cameras.
Sure. See, Srinivasan, you made a pertinent point. Only thing is, I think the Google also carries a credibility. I will say that the search on Google is, if you see the latest trends, it's shifting to search on specific medium. For example, the Twitter as a social media, let's say social media is more for news and information. So when you go to Twitter, there is a possibility that you will be able to associate with the media brands easily. So if you were to search for a news in a Google platform or on a Twitter background, then your association with the brand will be a little higher. So like how Deepakda mentioned that there can be an app, and we have an example, a very successful example of New York Times, which is now more digital and then print, and which is still a profit-making, transforming company. And I think it is a set example for everybody else. And they're working on that long tail and onto the side, which is analysis content. So I think media also has to follow some of those principles. I'm not elaborating further on it, but I do agree with you that the credibility aspect on digital diminishes a little, but one can very carefully nurture it and handle it on very media specific social media handles. So that's how I think.
Alok, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your experience that you've shared with all of us in this group. We will look forward to having you more on sessions. I mean, we're discussing one of it at the beginning of the journey today. And I really want to come back to you with that session maybe a couple of months down the line. Thank you very much.